Productions.
We will be examining the concept of motor imagery. Now, motor imagery is a fascinating thing. It allows us to mentally rehearse an action before we do it. Previous research has found that motor imagery contributes to the performance of athletes during athletic competition. It also helps promote recovery from injury. Interestingly, motor imagery, when combined with physical activity, is very effective. But when the physical activity is not there, motor imagery alone is not effective. It is now well known that this physical experience is important before engaging in the motor imagery. Small subliminal muscle activity has been recorded in the muscles during motor imagery. Now what this means is that while we are imagining the event or the action, small muscles are actually mimicking the signals that would occur during the actual physical activity. Very fascinating stuff. Some research has actually begun to provide evidence that motor imagery, accompanied by actual movement, may increase the benefits of motor imagery. This motor imagery, as we will now call it dynamic imagery, is what we'll be looking at in this study. The study aims to examine whether dynamic imagery, that is imagery with movement, increases performance better than imagery alone. Now we will also be examining the comparison of temporal congruence between the imagery and the actual physical event. Now what that means is we will be examining whether the time it takes you to mentally rehearse the action, how similar is it to the actual time it takes to complete the action. So that, on top of which imagery performs best, is what we'll be looking at in this study. Thank you.
Dr. Moschenberger here. Today we will begin our trials. With me I have my two lovely participants here. And I'll be passing out the movement imagery questionnaire. What that is we'll be determining how good they are at mental imagery before we begin to rule out if they're too good or if they're not good enough. Today, for our experiment, we will be concerned with three types of imagery. There is internal visual imagery, which you imagine yourself in the first-person perspective. There is the external visual imagery, where we will imagine ourselves in the third-person perspective, and the kinesthetic imagery. We would like to focus mainly on the kinesthetic imagery, in which you view your arms or your legs moving. And then for our experiment, we will have 4 warm-up jumps. Each one of you will perform 4 warm-up jumps, followed by 10 actual jumps and 10 motor imagery trials. Now we will have you begin with an actual jump, so that we will not have you imitating a jump without actually having to perform it. So, after you do your actual jump, we'll split the 10 motor imagery trials. Half you will be doing with just imagery, no movement, and then we will have the other 5 with the dynamic imagery. And while you're doing this, we would like you to imagine you are actually jumping over a bar placed at 90% of your personal best. Can we do that? All right, let's begin. Jump 1, actual jump. Jump 2, motor imagery. Done. 1, jump 3, dynamic imagery. Jump 2. Oh yeah. Subject 2, jump 2, motor imagery. Subject 2, jump 3, dynamic imagery.
15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure.
Hello, I'm Dr. Collett. We produced this study to test whether coupling actual movement with motor imagery produced more successful jumps at a 90% of an athlete's max as opposed to motionless imagery. So we found that the percentages for dynamic imagery produced 45% of success, the motionless was only 35% of success, and the overall quality of the jumps were greater for dynamic imagery as opposed to motionless imagery.